Welcome everyone, it's great to see you here today to celebrate our 34th anniversary. Leah offered me money if I shoved it in my face, so I think I've just made myself 20 cents as well as a full mouth of Black Forest cake. Happy anniversary everyone. That's what it says to me that I should say in all of our anniversaries. Great to come together and celebrate, isn't it? What is a time of celebration? Normally it's shared food and hugs together, but this is a very different anniversary, isn't it? I mean, on this anniversary, I know I'm missing the food. Normally after an anniversary service, we all get together and we gather and we have all sorts of different food, wonderful. I miss the gathered collective singing. I miss the high fives, a special shout out to Christian and Lily. I miss your high fives. You know, this time is very different. Some parts of it, of course, have been quite good. I remember a couple of months ago, I made breakfast for Narelle with my daughter Lauren on Mother's Day, and I haven't been able to do that for years. And I'm sure that you can name some things that have been a part of your journey over the last couple of months that have been quite good. Things that you've enjoyed. Maybe there's been some extra time that you've been able to spend doing with someone, or maybe I've heard many stories of encouragement and love and support, and maybe that's been part of your experience. Of course, there are other things that have been quite painful. I'm over Zoom. Zoom fatigue, Zoomitis has set in. I'm not sure how many times that I can fake an internet outage so that I can just get away from the screen. Maybe that's been part of your experience as well. Here on the screen is a picture of our family dog. Her name is Luna. And every time someone from our family leaves the house, our dog, she follows along behind us. And as we close the front door, she sits in front of the door. Our door is one of those ones with slats, you know, it's wood and then it's got these glass kind of inserts, and we can see our dog just looking at us with her sad eyes, wanting to come and do something and play. And for many of us, that's been kind of our experience over these past months. We've wanted to go and do something with people. We've wanted to come and play, but we feel separated. Not separated by a door, but separated by a virus, isn't it? Confined to quarters of some sort. What are you missing? What are you missing during this time? Is it the big things or is it the small things? Maybe it's some of the things of life that you take for granted, the opportunity to just grab a coffee with someone. Maybe it is to experience a consoling hug. Maybe for some of you, you're missing the noise and the rumble of the train on the way to work. Well, maybe not so much the train on the way to work, are you? What are you missing about our church service when we might gather? Witty comments from the pulpit? Let me tell you something, it's hard to have a little bit of humour when the cameraman's kind of half asleep. You know, that's difficult. Maybe you're missing that. Maybe you're missing the shared coffee and conversation, or maybe you're missing the ability to sing loudly because lots of other people around you are singing and you won't feel so conspicuous. The joy of hearing and seeing other people smile, seeing a little kid run around and be kind of crazy like kids should be. There's lots of things that we miss. Sometimes we not only miss, we feel fearful or anxious. I was talking to a couple of people from our Karen community, and for numbers of them, they're missing their family. For many of them, as they immigrated to Australia, parts of their family immigrated to other parts of the world, numbers to the United States. And for many of the Karen families, they have extended family members who have the COVID virus. They're either sick or in a hospital, and they miss them desperately. And so I wanted to say today, so how do we respond in this time? How do we think positively in the sense of biblically during this period where we're separated by distance, but we're united by Jesus? In Luke chapter 11, it contains what is commonly called the Lord's Prayer, our Father who art in heaven, and so on. In many ways, it could be more accurately called the disciples' prayer. The disciples asked Jesus to teach them to pray, and then he gives them a model. If that's the disciples' prayer, where is the Lord's Prayer really? I want to suggest to you it's actually found in John chapter 17. It can be more accurately described that way. It was Jesus, first of all, is speaking to his closest disciples. In fact, he has just been explaining to them about how he's going to leave. He's going to leave them. Where, in a sense, the fear and the anxiety starts to ramp up amongst his closest followers. And then Jesus withdraws and prays. And this prayer of Jesus is recorded in John 17. Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son so he can give glory back to you. For you have given him authority over everyone. He gives eternal life to each one you have given him. Jesus cries out to God the Father, bring glory to God. That will soon be fulfilled on the cross as Jesus fulfills the Father's will. The glory is glory because it brings new life to the lost. You see, this prayer reminds us that Jesus is the one who brings new life. And if you're a follower of Jesus, you have received that gift of new life through him. He is not only that, he is the agent of unity, the one who draws people to God, calls them to himself. In verse 8 it says, for I passed on to them. This is Jesus saying, Jesus passed on to them, to us, the message that you, God the Father, gave me. They accepted it, and I know that I come from you, and they believe you sent me. You see, here is a reminder that Jesus is the centre of the Christian church. Not a celebrity leader, not a pope, not a Billy Graham. The centre of the church is not a cathedral. It's not a creed. No, Christ is the centre. Christ is the cornerstone. You know, at times it's been fascinating to watch how the government has tried to interact with services and religious organisation. At times it seems they're not sure what to do, and they revert to old images. The church is a building in their mind, or sometimes described in numerous reports as conducting a religious ceremony, and there's nothing further from the truth. You see, the church is not a ceremony, it's not a building, it's a living organism. It's a dynamic group of people who are gathered to learn and share and encourage and love and grow in faith together. See, we are more than bricks and mortar. See, the church is the people of God united by Jesus. We are centred around Jesus. Do you hear that message today? Do you hear that in the times when you fear or are anxious about what the future of the church is? Or what your experience of the church is at this moment? Pandemics may stop buildings and services, but they do not stop the church, because the church is centred on Jesus, not on a building or a service. And not only that, in this prayer, Jesus goes on, apart from reminding that he is at the centre of it, he goes on to ask that the church would be protected by God the Father. Now I am departing from the world, and they are staying in this world, but I am coming to you. This is Jesus, in a sense, praying directly to God. Holy Father, you have given me your name. Now protect them, protect my followers, protect the church by the power of your name, so that they will be united just as we are. Protect them by the power of your name. Jesus' prayer is that the church will be protected by the power of who God is. That they will be protected in unity and mission, the things that draw us together, the things that unite us, the things that we gather around and serve, that we will remain united. Now, does this mean that nothing evil can happen to a Christian? I mean, I don't need to worry about social distancing or personal protective equipment. God is protecting me. Well, no, that's not what it means at all. You see, merely weeks after this event of Jesus praying, the newborn Christian church would begin an era of terrible persecution. Stephen, one of the early church leaders, would be stoned. The church would be gathered and then split from Jerusalem to all ends of the known world at that time. 30 years later, the Apostle Peter would write to these split and separated churches. The churches now, though, that were not filled just with Jewish Christians, but Jewish and Gentile Christians as they had grown. You see, the dispersion of the church had caused the growth of the church. This letter is from Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. I'm writing to God's chosen people who are living as foreigners in the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia and Bithynia. He writes to encourage this church to stay strong, to grow in their trust and obedience to the Lord in spite of the circumstances, in spite of the persecution that they had been experiencing. You see, Jesus' promise of protection is not a promise of a peaceful, easy feeling. You see, Jesus actually prays this because he expects the church to undergo trials. He expects the church to suffer in it and to experience persecution from both the world and from Satan, who tries to destroy that new life. This promise of protection is that Jesus will walk alongside through that time. That God will not let the faith that has grown and been nurtured to be ripped away. That the Spirit of God protects and comforts through those hard times. You see, the church at times has been separated. Distance has split the church. Wars, famines, plagues, pandemics. But the church has always been protected by God. You know, the thing that we're going through at the moment, I've got to say, is not persecution. In my mind, it's more like a trial. We're not being specifically persecuted because of our faith. This is just a trial that all churches, and in fact our world, is going through at this time. So let me ask you this question. If we know that the God of the heavens protects us, does that give us courage during this time? Does it give us confidence? Does it strengthen our faith that we live under the protection of the name of God? Romans 8 reminds us that nothing can separate us from the love of God. So what are we called to do during these times? How should we live? You know, I'm normally a risk taker in life. Particularly when I was younger, I loved climbing trees and mountains, clambering over rocks and jumping over gullies, anything to kind of get the heart pumping. But I can remember very clearly and distinctly when that changed. It was when I was a father of a 2-year-old. Narelle and I were on holidays, and just with our oldest daughter Lauren. Ainsley wasn't born at this particular time, and we had travelled up to the Gold Coast, and we were staying in kind of like a 1970s sort of a high-rise apartment building. And as I walked into this apartment, I had this knot just grab a hold in my stomach and twist around and grind together, because I looked out to the edge of the apartment and it had kind of one of those sliding glass windows, and outside it was a balcony, but the balcony looked like it had been constructed, as I said, in 1975, and it was only kind of like thigh height, and it didn't have the protective railings and security that you would expect to see it done nowadays. And I could just see this image. I could just see this image of my 2-year-old who was clambering and exploring and doing all the things that they were doing. I could see her pushing a table towards the edge of it, climbing up on that table and going, "Hey, look at me, Dad," before she tumbled over the side. And I couldn't get it out of my mind, and I was so paranoid and fear-stricken. My risk-taking just dissolved. You can imagine what Narelle and I did. You know, we locked the doors, we barred the windows in the room. In fact, we pushed a bed in front of it so there was no way that she could actually hurt herself. Andrew Harris, super dad, protector of daughters. Is that what protection means? You know, Jesus calls for protection here could be understood in that way. When something is in danger, withdraw. When something is in danger, put up the barricades and protect. Don't allow people to go anywhere near the danger. But that's not the protection, in fact, that Jesus prays for his people. I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. His prayer is that the church will be protected while it's in the world, not withdrawn from the world. You see, because I want to say that the church is called to be present and a presence. Called to be salt and light, to participate, not to withdraw. And when the church has been present in the world, it's actually been the time that it's made its largest impact in the world. Merely months ago, though it might seem like years to you and me, fires rampaged across Australia. Devastation and loss, pain and struggle. But now we're beginning to see the shoots of new life, aren't we? Because death comes from life. The ashes created by the fire are in fact wonderful soil for new life and growth. That's the same as it has been for the church. I mean, think about how did the early Christian church survive? Humanly speaking, the odds were stacked against it. I mean, it was unthinkable that a kind of a small despised movement from a kind of a corner of Palestine could become the dominant faith of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire which protected and propagated and lifted up its own pagan gods. And yet the spread of Christianity, the spread of faith in Jesus is a phenomena. How does it happen? I mean, the church was considered illegal. And wave after wave of persecution sought to squash it. So how did this young fledgling movement make it? You know, persecution has a couple of fold effect, doesn't it? Right at the beginning, it diminishes the size of what's being persecuted, in this case, the church. If you were a part of a church and it just became too hard, you would leave. And so the people who aren't fully committed to faith in Jesus are quick to disperse. But what it leaves with is truly committed people. People who are passionate about their faith. And that passionate, committed group of people makes a change. You see, it's always better to have fewer committed Christians than a crowd of casual Christians. And this early church was persecuted and forced to disperse, but they became distinctly committed in who they were. The earliest Christians did not have church buildings. They typically met in homes. They didn't have public ceremonies to introduce them to the wider community. They had no access to social media. There was no celebrity Christians that were able to big note and get attention like that. Most of the people in their world lived close together in neighbourhoods that sort of rubbed shoulder to shoulder. And the faith and the life of the church spread as neighbours were observed and lived, while the church was present and a presence in the community. What kind of lives did they lead? Well, Justin Martyr, one of the early Christian theologians, writes a letter to Emperor Pius at one stage, and he described the believers this way. He said, "We formerly rejoiced in uncleanness of life. We lived wild lives, but now we love only chastity. Before we used the magic arts, but now we commit ourselves to the true God. Before we loved money and possessions more than anything, but now we share what we have. Before we hated one another and killed one another, wouldn't eat with another race. But now, since the manifestation of Christ, of seeing Jesus, we've come to a common life and pray for our enemies and try to live a life that is not about hate." You see, this is a church that was present and a presence in its community. The church did not withdraw when it easily could have. People were won to Christianity. People became followers of Jesus when they saw the love and the consistency of life amongst that committed church. You see, the persecution of the first century church led to Christianity spreading through all the world. And that's true throughout history. Whenever there's been pain and persecution, the church has thrived. Tertullian, an early church writer, famously wrote that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. The persecution sees to new life. And that's proven to be correct again and again. And even in recent times. We've seen the flourishing of the church in China. We've seen the flourishing of the church in the Middle East, places where Christianity is growing faster than it ever has throughout history. Because they did not withdraw. They lived as a presence amongst their world. You see, this COVID season causes us at CHBC to ask that same sort of questions. Who are we as the church? What is God calling us to be? These times of testing burn away all the unnecessary stuff and ask us, what should we focus on? How do we be present in Maroondah? And I've got to say that to all of that, very simply, that love has to be central. Love has to be central. Did you know that Christianity first started the Meals on Wheels program? I'm not talking about 100 years ago, I'm talking about in the early centuries in the life of the church. By the year 250, they were feeding more than 1,500 of the most hungry and destitute people in Rome. Faith was spreading through these lives of faithful, ordinary believers. The mission of God to love the world in the hands of just everyday people. That's the church. That's the church being present. It's not the clergy. It's not a celebrity. It's all of us participating. And I've got to say that I'm so excited when I see some of these things happen around the life of Croydon Hills Baptist. I'm excited when I see some of you guys and the way in which you're living and expressing that love. The mission of God in the hands of every Christian. Causing it to engage with people, causing it to care for people, causing it to love and to serve. This is the mission of God that we unite around. This is what it means to have unity. Jesus calls us to himself and unites us in mission and purpose. In verse 23, I am in them and you are in me. This is the presence of Jesus in us, the people of God. May they experience such perfect unity that the world will know that you sent me and that you love them as much as you love me. The triune God, unity of heart, mind and action, unity generated by love is witnessed in the life of the living church. You know, it excites me when I see this not only in the life of Croydon Hills Baptist, but in the life of the wider churches. And it excites me when I speak to my colleagues, when I listen to the stories that are being told across churches all across this world at this time, about how the church is coming together in unity and love and centrality of mission. You know, one of the earliest songs that was put out by people, I'm not sure if you've seen it, the UK version of The Blessing. It was combined by 65 different churches, and at the end of the song it displayed this message: our buildings may be closed, but the church is alive. Isn't that an encouragement? Isn't that a reminder of strength and purpose and unity? That the church is alive, this presence in our world. You know, through this COVID season, we've seen churches combine in purpose and unity more than I can recall in my recent times. I see churches again and again looking outwards rather than looking inwards. This is living out the prayer of Jesus. It not only warms your heart, but it strengthens it. You see, because a church is not a building. A church is not a service. It's not a ministry program. The church is the people of God united by Jesus. You know, what an encouragement that is for us today on this our anniversary. That even though we might be separated by distance, we are united by Jesus. Amen.